Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the October 20 meeting of the Raleigh Historic Development Commission. I'm Nick Fountain. I'm the chair this year. And at this point, we will ask the staff to call the roll, please.
Good morning. Travis Bailey is excused. Ian Dunn.
Here.
Rashay Height.
Here. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Nick Fountain.
Here.
Heather Leah is excused. Harold Millette. Janine McCullough is excused. Katie Pate.
Here.
John Reese.
I'm here.
Susan Singer.
Here.
Gaston Williams.
Here.
Okay. That was,
You didn't call Kay Webb.
Oh.
but I had already marked.
I'm here.
I saw you.
All right.
My apologies. I was trying to go in alphabetical order, and you're on the top of the list as vice chair.
No problem.
Okay, well, welcome everybody, and we'll work our way down through the agenda. A couple of consent items to start with. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? If you'll raise your hand, I'll acknowledge. John Reese moves to approve the agenda. Second from Gaston Williams. Any question? All in favor say aye or raise your hand. And okay, I see all the hands that carried. The next is the approval of the minutes. You should have gotten an email with the minutes attached from the September 15 meeting. I hope you had an opportunity to look at those and remember what we were all supposed to do in the interim. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? All right, Rashay Height moves to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Second from John Reese. Any questions? All in favor say aye or raise your hand. All right, that motion carried unanimously, and we will move to the CLG part of the agenda. And the first item is the Josephus Daniels house. And let's see, who on staff is going to explain this item, or are we going to ask Ian to look at it, or what?
We are going to let Ian from the research committee talk about it. I do have available the application if you do wish for me to show any of that.
Okay.
And also we do have the applicant here, and I just drew a blank on his name, but he is here.
Okay, great. So Ian, why don't you walk us through this now?
Well, it's been requested that we go through the process of de-designating the Josephus Daniels house. So that came to the research committee, and we discussed it at some length during that meeting and decided that it would be best to bring it to the whole commission to have a discussion about whether we should de-designate it.
I will add, Tanya Tully here, that the process, and it's Mr. Murray, Scott Murray, who is here, who is the applicant and is here on behalf of the owners, the Masons. The process to de-designate a landmark is the same as for designating it. So upon your vote, it would go then to City Council, who would then refer the application to the State Historic Preservation Office, who would have a time period in order to respond. Then subsequently, there will be the joint public hearing with City Council, and then it'll come back to y'all. And then the very last step would be the decision of City Council whether to have it, rescind the ordinance and have it de-designated.
What I will do before we open it up for discussion, I would like to ask Mr. Murray, Scott Murray, to talk to us a little bit about what is the thought process here and what are the goals and objectives. And I will say to you, Mr. Murray, that I'm pretty well aware of the site because I've been on this commission before, and I used to live near there. So I'm aware there's a lot of land associated with it. There's a large auditorium next to Glenwood Avenue, and then there is the original house with the circular drive in the front. And I'm also aware that there have been issues with respect to Mr. Daniels and and various portions of his background. So anyway, Mr. Murray, how about you talk to us a little bit and then we'll have discussion.
Thank you, Chairman Fountain. Commission, I'm Scott Murray. I'm a landscape architect, and I have been retained by the Masons to represent them. The property, which is just under 4 acres, as Mr. Fountain noted, is focused on Caswell Street and Glenwood Avenue. Also,
Speak up, if you will.
I'm sorry. The property is just under 4 acres. Access is onto Caswell Street. That's from Glenwood Avenue. The Masons have, been in the property since I believe 1950. Have owned the property. The home that is there is currently, I should say, rapidly deteriorating. It requires a lot of maintenance and upkeep. They have tried to make a determination whether that's the best home for them, and I think they've made some efforts to market the property in the past. The current change of climate, I should say, about the racial inequalities has sort of created a very dark cloud over the property, being tied to Mr. Daniels, his activities, participation in the segregation efforts in his past, and so to that end, we just feel like it's there's to continue to celebrate the property and honor Mr. Daniels in this way, kind of renders any future use of the property in question, I should say. There are interested parties, but I think every time that any discussions are had, delisting becomes paramount. It's a burden on the property, it encumbers the property. For that reason, they would like to see it listed.
Okay. Are there, is there anything else, Mr. Murray?
Other than the information that we submitted with the application, we did summarize some of the pertinent facts, and that speaks for itself. There's also a letter by Mr. Price, the Vice President of the Masons, in the package that speaks to the request as well. That's all that we have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. Then let's turn to discussion as to what the thoughts of the various members are. Ian, do you want to lead off and maybe tell us a little bit of what some of the discussion points were within the committee and the decision to punt to the full body?
Sure. There was some brief discussion of maybe changing the focus of the listing to off of Daniels and onto some other maybe portion of the house's history to retain its status as a landmark. There was also talk of delisting it. The more that I think about it, I'm in favor of delisting it. If you take away Daniel's association with the house, I don't believe that we would seek designation for the property. And if we want to get away from Daniels, then we should get away from Daniels. I don't think refocusing the meat of the designation is the way to go.
All right, other comments from you, Gaston? It looked like you, that was just background noise. I'm hearing back, I see it pops up on my screen right now, for example, and K-Web's talking and I can tell she's not, so it's gotta be background noise. Somebody's moving papers and the like. Susan Singer, you wanted to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. I was on the committee, and there was a lot of discussion about the decision and how to approach the historic landmark status. And I think one of the things that was really important to the commission was preserving whatever history there was, because I don't think it's our decision to decide how we treat landmarks, but our decision is about history. And if there is any history, and I respect Ian saying, delist it because we don't want to honor Josephus Daniels, I completely agree with that. But is there history? I mean, North Carolina, there is history. And can we preserve history without preserving or honoring racists? And I think that's the challenge of our committee. And, I'll go with whatever we decide, but I think that our job is history. And if I don't know the history of that building, maybe you all know it better, but I do think there's something about honoring history and not honoring racism that we have to figure out. And it's going to come back multiple times. And I think Ian said even the state is trying to work this out. So I do think we need to be considerate. If we delist it, then it can't, that's it, And I've been on the commission a very short time, and we've already lost a house to decay. So I don't know if that's right or wrong, and I respect Ian's decision, but I do think this committee should think about that.
Okay. Thank you for that. Are there comments from K-Web?
Yes. Is there any architectural significance to the building that needs to be preserved?
Well, it's a substantial structure and impressive design for its time. Ian expressed his opinion that the building in and of itself wouldn't be worthy of designation as an architectural piece. But so there is that. So that's all I'll say on that. I'll tell y'all what I think myself, but I want to hear from everybody else before I use the prerogative of the chair to say anything. Gaston Williams, you had your hand up a minute ago.
Yeah, just a couple quick questions. I was looking for the document that was submitted related to the history of the building. Was this a residence at one point? Yes, right?
Yeah.
Just kind of morphed into this other thing?
Well, it was presumably it was Daniel's home place, and he died circa 1950, I think. And at some point in there, the Masons acquired it and added that big auditorium to it. And but like other organizations, there have been changes within the composition of the Masons. And the like, and as with many civic organizations. And so I don't know that the Masons have made much use of it in recent years, and the Masons have probably had some interest in selling it for a while. And I think that's the background, and I'm aware of that because it was before the COA committee and this body 10 years ago. And I am a little concerned about the notion that it is decaying as it sits, but that's a somewhat separate question. So there is a piece of federal property out in front of the house that would have to be dealt with as well because of Daniel's connection as Navy Secretary during World War I. There was a Navy armament, machine gun or whatever, placed in a square out in front of the house. It's about a 10 by 10 site that, because the feds don't give away armament. The property, as I understand it, still has federal government connection to it. So there is that about it as well. Most things that have been discussed about doing something with it would, there have been thoughts about whether there's a way to convert the big auditorium into condos or something, or repurpose the house, and then is the site itself as contrasted with the house itself, does it have significance as well? I mean, quite apart from this issue about what do we want to think or not think about Daniels and his legacy. So, John Reese, were you getting ready to say something?
I've got a couple of questions. Is there a difference between the historical nature of the building and the historical nature of the site? So, for example, is the site of where he lived as much of an issue as the house itself, or is I guess my question is, does the marker that's outside on Glenwood Avenue saying this is where Josephus Daniels lived, does that go away if we de-designate this, or does the historical site nature of where he lived still remain? If that's the case, the issue of his name be associated with the site is still there. So I guess my question is, how far does this go in terms of taking his name off stuff?
A couple things here, John. Tanya Tully here. So the marker out on Glenwood Avenue is a marker put up by the State Highway Marker Program, and has nothing to do with the local landmark designation. Okay. So that would remain unless somebody petitioned a whole other process to make that go away. I don't know if that's even a possibility. To answer that, the other thing I just wanted to interject, I think y'all need to have the discussion now, but it is also possible that you could move this forward through the process without a recommendation at this point. I mean, if you've got a recommendation today, then that's what you'll move forward. But I think it is also, you could say that you're withholding recommendation until after the joint public hearing, and then come back and make a final recommendation after the public hearing. It's not your typical process, but I just wanted to throw that out there as an option. Did that answer your question, John?
Yes, it does. My other question is am I allowed to ask the applicant? Question?
Oh, yes, and actually he wanted to, I think he had a few comments also based on what you said.
Okay, please offer the comments first.
All right, Mr. Murray, you had something else?
Yes, just one item I'd like to point out, I believe, or a couple of responses to comments.
Mr. Murray, your voice keeps dropping, so we can't hear you.
Okay, I'm very sorry. One comment, the State Historic Preservation Office report, I believe, noted that there was nothing architecturally significant or anything related to landscape architecture or the site that was significant. That the designation is more a result of the prominence that Mr. Daniels had at the time of his actions and all in the press in the society of Raleigh, more so than the property itself. And I think that's detailed a little better in page 32 of the attachment in that letter to Mr. Fountain, Chairman Fountain, from the HPO. Secondly, as to the other possibilities for repurposing the property, it does sit in a residential district. It has its only access is on Caswell Street, which is residential in nature, and so the opportunities for repurposing it for another use are somewhat limited due to traffic, other issues, and under any scenario, the dark cloud still hangs over the property, so it becomes in this day and age something nobody really wants to deal with in terms of purchasing the property or repurposing the property. And for that reason, I think we respectfully request that be given due consideration.
Okay.
The history, of Mr. Daniel, or of the property and his association with it, we just feel it's maybe best kept for the library shelves.
Okay, thank you for that. Let me say this. Brashay, did you have your hand up? You're muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to weigh in on this really quickly. I think that Susan brings up a really good point about how us contending with how we honor history and kind of acknowledge history without or with, in dealing with the structure and acknowledging history in place. And I think, that's something I guess we will have to handle on a case-by-case basis. But in this instance in particular, because of what's been said and what's been noted about there not being any architectural significance to the property, I believe that because the preservation of the place seeks to honor the person, and that in and of itself is flawed, right? So I'm just curious about if this remains in maintains its designation, what is the message that we're sending with that being the justification? So I guess in all that, I would, agree with Ian and his thoughts about, it losing its landmark designation.
Yeah, and my thought is I agree with Brashay in one sense, but also with Susan. It seems to me as we struggle with our checkered past, we need to. I'm not sure that I agree with de-designating, and I'm not sure I agree with trying to erase our past over in North Carolina and in Raleigh. And beyond that, I think that the Daniels family, although this property was originally listed, I think, as on account of Josephus Daniels. But as I've thought about the Daniels School on Oberlin Road and various other buildings here and there, the Daniels family has contributed mightily to Raleigh over the last 100 years or more. And so I'm troubled with the idea that somehow we take all the names off the buildings and the like, and somehow pretend that the past wasn't the past. I think we need to be finding ways, and this is just one of these buildings, but I think we need to be finding ways to acknowledge the unfortunate realities of our past, the struggles that folks have had to overcome impediments put in their path, and the triumphs that we have, and the ones we will have in the future. But I somehow or another, I come down on the side of the history of the thing, and I can't help being aware that the Masons were trying to sell it off to put condos on it 10 years ago, and in some sense, I'm afraid that they just see this as an opportunity to get loose from what they came to regret, even though they've had half price on the real estate tax for 50 years. And that is troubling that it is disingenuous in some respects as relates to the Masons. And so I don't care to reward that. But facts are facts, and I'd hate to have a rush to judgment when we're still wrestling with how we need to handle racism and racist in the past, and how do we go about acknowledging that we have people who have done many good things, but also did some bad things, and certainly if he was connected to the 1898 riots in Wilmington or fanned the flames of those kinds of activities, we find that totally abhorrent. And people like me think, God, I hope my ancestors weren't involved in that. But So those are some of my thoughts. My inclination, I guess, is to pass the thing on and have some more discussion. I don't think any of us want to honor racist or that part of Josephus Daniels' life, but the legacy of creation of the News Observer and all that it has accomplished and the various things in the community do matter, at least in my view. Do y'all want to try to go on and make a decision? Okay, Katie Pate, you had your hand up, and then I'll call on John Reese.
Yes, thank you. My thoughts on this, I'm kind of torn. My initial response is that we should go back and amend the report to reflect that some of the different history, if there is any significance, which it sounds like it might be a stretch to change that. I think if we keep it, that we should seek to add in some additional context about Daniels's activities and how we denounce those, and that we denounce white supremacy. I think in the application for de-designation, there was some of those materials and some of that context that would be easy to add in. I would hate for us to lose another property to de-designation, but at the same time, I think we do need to be very thoughtful and very intentional about how we want to move forward on this. So I feel like there is a good argument for allowing the de-designation, but at the same time, I wouldn't want to reward any ulterior motives of just wanting to tear it down and, you know, throw some condos up in that area. But at the same time, I think it's very important for us to do everything that we can in this body to denounce white supremacy and not honor the legacy of people who committed crimes and were racist.
Is that Katie? John Reese?
I wanted to say thank you, Verche, for saying what you said, because I really wanted to hear from you on this, because I think this matters. And you used a word which I think is interesting, that we toss around with this, and that is the word honor. Now, when we talked about, you know, when the Daniels family took down the statue, or when those statues are coming down, those things were there to honor somebody. I don't think this house was built to honor somebody. I don't think we keep it on that we de-designate it because it was honoring anybody. I think if we honor anybody with this house, it is the peoples whose backs it was built on, which I got to tell you, I'm pretty sure that this was not a whites-only construction crew. I think that there is some real value in honoring the craft of African Americans who were basically being punished at the same time that they were being used. Secondly, I agree with Mr. Fountain regarding the disingenuousness of this application at this time, because I know that this is not an easy property to sell. There's no way. And in some regards, I think it should remain an albatross. That this is not honoring the man. I think that this is honoring who the people who made this, who built it, and the very folks who were. We need to honor those who were oppressed versus focusing on Mr. Daniels. I don't care, too much about his good things. I think that we should really focus on the dichotomy between the good things that he did and the real issues of who he was as a person. And I think this house is not an honor to that. I think it is a marker to that. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay.
Mr. Fountain, Mr. Murray, when you get the opportunity, would also like to speak. He has additional comments.
Okay, I'll get back to Mr. Murray. Thank you for that. Gaston Williams?
If I were to vote right now, it'd be not to de-designate, but I need a longer period of reflection. I'm torn about sanitizing history, even when there are awful people involved, because, the adage, I think it's appropriate that we need to remember the bad things and the good things that people do as guidance for the future. And maybe in an odd way, it would help to keep his name on things. But even if we were to de-designate, they were to sell, build condos, whatever the intentions are, until this generation is dead or historians no longer care, it would forever be the Daniels property. And I'm not sure what the purpose would be. Real quick, I recently went to Richmond, Virginia, and went to the Lee statue. If you get a chance, go Google it and look at it. Never has been a greater symbol. They took all the statues down on Monument Avenue. But the Lee statue's been turned into a piece of powerful art that may, in the end, not be taken down because it's so powerful to capture the whole thing. It's actually remarkable. You ought to see it. And they project images on the statue that are related to the current discussions and everything else. But it's been turned into a monument in honor of, not in honor of anybody, a monument about progressive and changing and getting rid of racism. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Susan Singer.
Thank you, Nick. I love this conversation, and I think that this group has put a lot of thought and consideration into exactly what I was talking about, honoring history, but not racism. And the last couple of comments were on that subject. And I'm going to suggest something. I don't know if this is logical, because obviously I'm new to this committee, but shouldn't we have, I guess we'll deal with it on each case, but shouldn't we have a potential smaller subcommittee that puts together a recommendation? Because the city of Raleigh, which is what we're concerned about, is going to have to address this. And we really should think about it from the historic perspective without honoring racism, but without whitewashing history. I loved what you said earlier, Gaston. That's absolutely the case. We learn from history. We don't whitewash what's happened in any other horrors of the world, but we don't honor them. So I think that's an important balance that we as a committee probably need to come to. So I don't know where you go with that, but I think a little subcommittee to focus on that would be beneficial to us at this point. And if that's not the way we do things, I'm okay with that too. But I just wanted to throw it out there.
Okay, I'll call for Shay Pike, and then Mr. Murray, I'll give you an opportunity to respond to some of this discussion.
I agree. I think these are really valuable conversations to be having. And I appreciate John's comment about kind of shifting, maybe not necessarily shifting the narrative, but undergirding the narrative with the, the involvement and the making of the architecture by people that were not of a majority background. I think that that's good. However, I do want to say with regard to the comment about sort of erasing history, I think that's something that we even could continue to talk about as a group. Because I guess I have the question about whether it's honor or preservation. Where is the appropriate place to tell these stories? And, it is one thing, you mentioned the contributions of the Daniels family, and there's elementary schools and things like that. There are places that are more or less representative of a positive impact on the community, but then there are others that we have that, like this house, that sort of sit doing what? So that would be my question. Where's the appropriate place to tell these stories? And then honestly, coming as an African-American from largely a background that has been, sanitized and erased, right? And so not having the benefit of having these structures in these places because of a certain narrative. And again, not to say that we should, wholesale erase history, but I think there is something where you take action toward a direction that you feel is positive for the future. I don't want to say I'm completely ignoring the concerns about the redevelopment of the site and all of that. As an architect and a person that, has genuine concerns over development in Raleigh and the urban landscape, I think those are very valid issues. But I just want to make sure we're also having that other part of the conversation too.
Yeah, thank you for that. And now, Mr. Murray, I'll let you have the sort of the last word, and then we'll decide what we're going to do for today's purposes.
Okay. Thank you very much. First, I'd like to point out that the historic designation, as we understand it, is not about the Daniels family and all of the positive and beneficial things they have done over the years and since this time. It's about Josephus standards. All of the SHPO report and all of the other background information pretty clearly points to his prominence, his standing in Raleigh society at the time as being the reason it is a significant property. This is not a public property. It's not a statue in a public square. It's not Market House or Fayetteville, and it's not even like a university building on UNC or NC State campus. This is privately owned piece of property, and the encumbrance is crippling, frankly. I'd like to ask that, how does a property owner have beneficial use of their property with such a legacy as this?
All right, thank you for that. And Mr. Murray, I will say that, speaking personally, that a hybrid use of this property, wherein maybe it is time to have townhouses along the cloverleaf and all that open field that is between the house and and most of the pavement. Maybe something that needs to be considered, and I certainly understand that property owners, we are here to blend and balance the needs of preservation of history and the rights of private property owners to make effective use of their property, and we do understand that. Is the sentiment here to take the comments of Tanya and move this forward and use the time to think about how's the best way to deal with that by letting it come, because it's going to come back to us anyway, and so we can address that then if you like. Gaston Williams, you had your hand up.
If a motion's in order, I'd move that we place this on the November agenda and move it forward. And if the chairman is disposed to appoint a small group to digest all the issues so that we could help us mull it over or add additional information, that would be acceptable too.
You heard there's a motion made to defer it and to create or either refer it to a committee or create one for this purpose. Is there a second to that motion? All right, Ian Dunn seconds that motion, and now we're open to discussion, and Rashay Height would like to say something.
I just had a question. So the public hearing that Tanya mentioned on this, is that something that's going to happen in between now and our November meeting, and then we hear?
I think
No.
Tanya can speak up here, but I think what's going to happen is that this, once we deal with it, it goes to the council. Then it's going to come, and there'll be this public hearing, and we've done it on other properties before, which they're pretty perfunctory. Maybe this one wouldn't be. And it comes back to this body again, and then goes back to the council for final action. And so whether we pass this motion and defer it a month and think about it some more before we send it to council, or whether we just save that and deal with it when it comes back anyway, we could go either direction.
So I can give you some dates. Hold on just a moment. Opening up the document. So the answer is no, the public hearing would not come. Okay, open up. Would not come before then. So the next thing would happen after, for this to move forward, RHDC would need to vote to send it to City Council and to take the next step. And that would either be to, that can either go with a recommendation or not. And that document does not want to open, so I can't give you the dates. Any case, so that would So if you voted today, then that would come forward. It would end up on the second, so it would end up on the second city council agenda, where it would be an administrative request to schedule a public hearing. The public hearing would likely be in January, perhaps not until February, because the state, and also then send it to the State Historic Preservation Office. The State Historic Preservation Office has 30 days to provide comment, should they so choose to. They don't have to, but we have to give them 30 days. And then there would be the public hearing. Y'all would sit in, city council would hear. If anybody has anything to say, certainly, I imagine the applicant would likely speak. And then after the public hearing is closed, it comes back to RHDC. If the timing works out well, it will go back, we send it to the research committee first. But that doesn't always happen, but it sounds like, but there would be plenty, there would at least be a couple of months in the interim between today and, before it would come back to you for you to actually make a final recommendation to city council, who would make the decision. And then if you defer it today to November, then that pushes, everything by a month.
Okay. All right. So everybody understand that? I guess my thoughts are, ultimately, I believe this body here ought to lead with respect to advising the city and the balance of all of these issues. Who better than this body to try to provide leadership and the balance, the needs of the property owner, but also the notions of history and the balance of on whose backs these things were built, and the whitewashing and all that. I don't know anybody better than us, or anybody's going to give it more thoughtful consideration than us. And to that end, we've got a motion. I believe we had a second. I think I'm going to vote against that motion because I almost think we'll do better thinking if we create a committee to know this is coming back and work on it rather than just giving it 1 month. I think for that reason, I'd about as soon pass it forward and let the council know that we are reserving our comments, suggestions, and positions until we get it back to us again.
Nick, I will accept that as a friendly amendment if the person that seconded it would agree also.
Well, Ian was nodding that he would. So so the motion then would be modified to pass the item forward to council. But our goal is not to penalize the property owner an additional month. Our goal is to give ourselves that time to seriously consider this and provide the leadership that we may be specially equipped to give. All right, so the motion is to send it forward without a recommendation, but hopefully to make council aware that we'll have a recommendation as and when it comes back to us. Is that all right? Everybody understand the motion? I'm going to call the question then. All in favor signify by raising your hand and saying aye. Okay, that carries unanimously, and Mr. Murray, I'm sure we'll have opportunity to discuss it and review things, but at least for this purpose, we're not holding you up for no reason, and we'll have to wrestle with this, all of us, over time. So thank you for that, and we'll move on to the next item, and the next item is a designation as contrasted with a de-designation, and this is a change of name thing on the Hubert Haywood House, and I will ask staff to explain this item for us.
Hello, this is a request, and the applicant and property owner is also on the line, but the request is to change the name of an already designated landmark to reflect the wife of the property owner for whom it's named, since she actually was instrumental in the design of the house. But I think Jimmy can speak to that more eloquently than I.
All right, Mr. Team, this will be an ideal opportunity for you to talk because in this setting, you're not under oath.
That makes me nervous. First of all, it's nice to see a lot of friendly faces, and I want to thank you guys all for your service, and particularly just in light of having listened to this previous conversation, thank you for carrying the weight of consideration of very important things in our life. Yeah, so just a very quick bit of background. I know you got a couple of pages we wrote up to provide some background. When the house was originally designated in the early 90s, we used a convention that was typical for those days. And then over the years, you know, as we told stories about the house, we kept coming back to stories about Marguerite, the wife, and which is information we got from Hubie Jr. and Shirley, who were the two kids who grew up here, who we had invited over after we had renovated the house. So essentially, this is really to rename it to honor the two, you know, both Hubert and Marguerite. And it's as simple as that. And if you've got any other questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Okay, I would say that I think this is a great way to note in passing how times have changed and we don't casually put the male name on the property. And if we were doing it today, we would certainly denote both. But we're just acknowledging that change is afoot in a number of ways. Are there any questions? Are y'all prepared to take action? Is there a motion to approve the change of name? John Reese moves to approve the request to change the name. Kay Webb seconds that motion. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye, raise your hand. Okay, everyone, all hands went up. That motion carried unanimously. And Mr. Team, just make a note that you did have one item come through this place where you actually got your motion approved. So there you go.
Well, he did, but this has to keep going through the whole process to get the ordinance change in order for there to be a new plaque. So you'll get to vote yay again.
All right. Well, that's great work. And we still miss you, Jimmy. No question about that. All right, we'll move on to other things. Staff want to talk to us about the status of the Weaver House. That's the one we were talking about that's been lost to neglect and the like. Tanya, who's going to talk about that?
Apparently it's me, although I am going to kick it back to Ian for just a little bit. I will start by saying that after the last meeting,
Hello.
Tanya, this is Aaron. It looks like you are muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you. I guess I was muted the whole time. So I will start and then I will probably kick it back to Ian since he didn't get a chance to tour the property. But since the last meeting, the property was inspected by a building official, and the chief building officer did provide a letter certifying that the property is significantly deteriorated, and that has triggered the section of the code that removes the need for a certificate of appropriateness for demolition of the property. And that was provided to the commission. What was it? The letter was directed to Nick as the chair, and it's official. I put it in the agenda, so that is official notice. And the property owner did offer up the opportunity for the commission to take a look at the property and see if there was anything worth salvaging. And Ian got to take that tour. Talk about
Okay, Ian, so what did you see?
It's a pretty big mess, honestly. I think probably about a third of the house is gone. there's people living in it right now. I don't know that there's a lot that can be done to save it, unfortunately. But it does have a fair amount of usable materials that are still in it. And I've been in contact with a gentleman who restores old houses and salvages them, and have arranged for him to get a lot of the stuff out of the house, including all of the oak flooring, possibly some of the windows if he can salvage some of those. I had a friend, personal friend, take the 2 cast iron sinks, and I have 3 windows. So a lot of the house is going to be saved, thankfully.
Were there, you didn't mention any molded mantelpieces and the like?
I think that the carpenter that I mentioned earlier is going to take one of the mantelpieces. I don't think that the other there's 2 mantelpieces remaining. I don't think that one of them is worthy of saving.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for the follow-up and thanks for the leadership. Brashay Height?
Yes, I think on the last call, just a question, I think we discussed, doing some documentation previously, as much as we could of the structure before we kind of started taking things out of it. Did that happen?
I did take some photographs of the house. So yes, it has been documented. I would say thoroughly, but not exhaustive.
Okay. And so, Tanya, the process, what happens to these photographs? How do we go about getting them into a ultimately safe place?
So we will add them. So we have a couple of possibilities. One is we can add.
You muted yourself again.
Sorry, I keep forgetting about that. It's apparently it's actually Monday. The photographs, well, right now there are copies of them just attached to this agenda on there, but there was a discussion, we talked about the possibility last month that we could keep this property on the Historic Raleigh app. Note it's been demolished, and once that happens, we could add the photographs there so that they are publicly available for folks to see. Additionally, we will print them and put them in the file that will live at the office.
Okay.
Does that satisfy? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answers the question. Partly, that was an exercise to be sure we all remember how that works, and partly it was to be sure that Ian's photographs got where they needed to go. Is there further questions or discussion, John Reese?
Yeah, as I was reading this whole report, Tanya, this is a situation where the owners who bought it tore it down with 5 days and they were fined?
No. This has been going on for a long time. The prior owner removed part of the house as a result of a vehicle hitting the house. And they they filed a COA requesting demolition. It was approved with the delay. They never acted on that demolition, also never acted on, repairing the house. And then this year, in February of 2020, it was purchased by the current property owner, who filed a COA for demolition. At approximately the same time, a housing code violation case was begun on the property, and then they sort of, joined up, and the request was made to make an official determination about whether or not demolition was needed for the safety of the public.
Okay, but what you're saying though is that the first applicant to demolish it, the house lasted the 365 days, but they didn't act on demolishing it after those 365 days.
Correct.
Okay.
That COA expired.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Riche, hi.
Yeah, I just have a general question, I guess, for the research committee. Does our group have a connection or a relationship with like local higher education institutions like NC State or Shaw University or even NC A&T in Greensboro? I ask because I've worked on a few historic projects kind of like this that maybe are more little known with regard to their historic significance. And sometimes those institutions will be sort of the keepers of photography and storytelling with that. So, when the site potentially gets developed in the future or something else happens, they maintain the history of some of these things. So I was just wondering, does any of this information, as we come across and discover these things and these applications happen, is there also a flow or relationship with those entities?
So this is a very unique situation. It's not happened ever that I'm aware of. That said, there are places that we could send, we could donate the photographs to. I don't know if there are already files on hand. I know there is an architectural collection at NC State, and of course, the state archive. So we can look at where we can also, put this information, so that I think duplicate efforts are probably better, since everything's digitally right now anyhow.
Well, I think you're right, Tanya, that we are more likely to preserve the information if it ends up in 2 or 3 places rather than just one set and we picked one place.
I've got another quick question. What happens, Ian, what happens to this stuff gets salvaged? Where does it go?
Your guess is as good as mine, but it's not going in a landfill. Likely, it would go to a house that this carpenter is restoring in Raleigh, hopefully in Raleigh.
And is there, one of the things that really saddens me about this situation is the energy and sustainability that's lost in tearing something down that was built with old growth wood. Those 2x4s in that house are, I'm sure, amazing, straight, true. Is there any possibility for not just saving the architectural details or the ornamental pieces, but the structure? It's so the 2x4s are somehow, we use as much of it as we possibly can, because I think the issue here for me is just the sustainability loss.
But sometimes these properties end up being donated to Habitat, and the material is preserved that way. But ultimately, that's probably a decision for the property owner rather than this body here. You have any other thoughts, Ian?
I will say that the property owner was mildly hesitant for the carpenter to remove the flooring. So I'm thinking he probably doesn't want to go to all that trouble to have somebody dismantle this house for the wood, unfortunately. I totally agree with you, John. And the 2x4s in that house are actual 2x4s. But I would say no, he's probably not going to do that.
Okay. Anything else? We got other stuff on the agenda we probably need to move to. but that's the status, and I think Ian deserves a 20% raise for his work on it. And so thank you, Ian. That was, I think, a nice effort. And otherwise, we'd have got nothing out of this, or the public would have got nothing out of this. Comprehensive Plan 101. What do we got there, Tanya?
So this is going to be a very quick and dirty 101, just to let you know that there is a historic preservation section of the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is a document that is curated by the Planning and Development Department that consists of, action items and policies related to, planning and development of, lots of things within the city of Raleigh. It is the document that is used when evaluating rezoning requests. And there is a historic preservation section that is largely items that are used by this body, but also there are some pieces related to the Historic Resources and Museums program as well. So I wanted to bring it to your attention. In the agenda, I attached the historic preservation element. I think it's a good idea I wouldn't, if you've got a lot of time, read the whole thing, but it's a good idea to skim through it. Anytime things come up, such as the rezoning application, staff will highlight the relevant policies that are in there. And some of them are, they're all broadly, let's try to keep things when we can. Some of the action items that are in, there is actually an action item, maybe two, related to trying to work with demolition and demolitions generally within the city, and see if we can, work towards getting a policy that would prevent some of what you're talking about, John, and requiring some salvage at certain times. So my suggestion is that you look through the action items, see individually what is important to you, and then when it is time to set an agenda for your annual retreat, that is one place to start when determining what this body is going to focus on as you move forward. There's so many important items. There are items related to affordable housing, that does talk about generally we need to keep doing architectural surveys, and we need to keep, y'all need to keep trying to designate, things as part of it. But there are also items that tie in with other, other things that may not seem directly historic preservation focused. So that is a really quick comprehensive plan 101.
So folks, I would say look at those things and think about, is there an opportunity in there to come out of an update with additional tools in the toolbox, and look at processes and think about where we are hamstrung, where preservation could be advanced better in a growing city like this. I'll give that a little thought. All right, so Tanya, you want to go on and talk about the annual reports and the retreat, and is it time to get something on the calendar?
It is time to get something on the calendar. I don't have any dates to proffer yet, because I wanted to find out what month you wanted me to shoot for in providing some dates. So for those of you who are new, the annual report is something that staff will prepare, that you will have the opportunity to review before moving forward and making a presentation to the City Council. You actually do report in two places. You are required to make a report to city council annually, but also as a certified local government, there is reporting that is done on that front as well. At the same time, when you make your annual report to city council is when you also put forward your next year's work program and get the blessing for what you're going to focus on in the next year. So with that being said, and then the annual retreat is typically when you discuss and decide what you want your work program to be. You will see what has already on there, what we can cross off what has been completed. You can see what is yet to be completed. Each committee will have its own items, and then there may be some that are more generally commission focused. So it is mid-October now. Usually these retreats last, a couple, 3 hours. And when we used to feed you when we were meeting in person, which potentially is still possible. It depends on what month it is and, what we're legally allowed to do. So I think y'all been doing it in February and either January or February previously. I've been working to hopefully try to move that back, but
what do you mean?
What is your pleasure?
You mean make it sooner or make it later?
Ideally, sooner is better because then you're more likely to be able to tie into the city budget process. And if there's a request that needs to be made, knowing what your work program is going to be is helpful.
Last year it was on February 25th, a Monday. It's fine with me to move it up, and I do think this may be the time to make a play to get expansion on the revolving fund, for example, and maybe there are other things we ought to be trying to do. And so I would say, Tanya, if you can look to the last 2 weeks in January and see if or first week of February and see what we can come up with. What are the rest of you thinking? Is anybody going to be on their world cruise at that moment or anything? Well, you're all sort of captive. Let's see, Brashay Height, did you have your hand up? You lost your video, but you.
Yes. I just, sorry, I didn't mean to turn my video off. I just had a quick question. Is this something that what's the time length for this? Is it a full day that we need to plan for?
Last time we did it for like 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock at night. So about 4 hours, and we had salad or whatever we had.
Well, all food that will meet any dietary desires within a reasonable budget.
If we're still under COVID, does that mean that we'll each individually be delivered food to our individual homes?
I like his thinking. I like it.
Yeah. So nobody has a particular problem if we aim toward the latter part of January. Tanya,
Okay.
one thing about it, by starting this soon, we will maybe get ahead of it and
Right.
And get ahead of all the conflicts that will come up.
Okay, I will send out a doodle poll with some possible dates and times, and we'll pick what works best for the majority of you.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, update on the lunch on health.
Oh, you want me to do that?
Well, I'll chime in too. We got somebody interested in it, and we'll see how that goes. And then Tommy and I are to go to City Council today and get the okay to move to make it to get the authorization to potentially make a loan to a purchaser so that we can get the property sold. Anyway, Tanya, you can say it better than me, I'm sure.
Nope, I think that pretty much said it. Hopefully, this afternoon's city council will result in them authorizing use of up to $175,000 to move forward on the Lestrade house, whether it is a loan to the new potential purchasers or whether we end up hiring somebody to put it back together to continue to try to sell. We will have to see. I have provided the interested parties with the loan application documents, so they can move forward with that once, assuming we get an okay from City Council.
The other two things that happened was the listing agreement had expired. This potential buyer did not come by way of the realtor, as best we can tell. And the option to purchase for PNC has also expired. And so we were thinking we could play this out with this current interested buyer and see where we are.
Well, we will need to renew the option agreement with Preservation North Carolina in order to, as a city property, the only in order to not go through a bid process, we can sell to a nonprofit organization with historic preservation easements. These general statutes allows municipalities to sell properties directly that way. And then that nonprofit entity can sell to a private entity with the covenants and rehabilitation agreement.
So we can do it hand in glove and get property to these people that are interested, and if that plays out. Anything else on Lestrade?
No, sir.
All right, the COA, it's happening, and plenty of it, and that's all we need to say on that. Who wants to report on community awareness? Heather's not here. Who else is on that committee? Gaston, is that you?
I'm on that committee. We have a couple projects underway. We're trying to use Instagram or some other platform to do a feature, a story, short story on various things. The target for this next effort is going to be Mount Hope Cemetery. It has certain historic aspects. It's not technically a building, obviously, but it's a historic property. And we're not always doing cemeteries, so we're going to do something else. But we're trying to do a live feed, like little 10-minute, 15-minute walkthrough to get people captured into what we do and try to build a following. So that's basically our current project underway.
Well, good for you. Good for you. Ian, do you want to say anything else on research?
The only thing that I have that we didn't talk about is the applications for Hillcrest Cemetery and the McAdams House will be heard at the joint hearing on the 4th of November. And we have a new application for Ann Robertson at 516 East Jones Street. She applied for her house to become a Raleigh Historic Landmark. We did discuss that at some length.
Right, so that one, and Tanya again, will be coming back through the process. She had not formally applied. That was sort of the pre-discussion to give her the thumbs up that it was worthwhile. That will be happening. I will add that for the November 4th joint public hearing, I do not yet know exactly what the procedure will be, what the about whether or not we will need to have anybody in council chambers or if y'all can attend remotely. I will let you know as soon as I know. It's not the way it typically works when it's in person is either staff or or a commissioner will present on the applications. The mayor will open the public hearing to listen to any comments. They will close the public hearing and then it'll come back to you all. There's no need to speak or anything. And generally it is first on the evening agenda at 7 o'clock. But I will let you know as soon as I know so I can ensure that whichever way it happens, that we've got a quorum of 7.
Well, maybe you all put it on your calendar, November 4th, 7 o'clock. and the rest we'll deal with as it comes. But it's usually perfunctory, and we're there, and we hear it. There's no comments, and in about 5 minutes we're back out of there. But we should hold that date. Nothing's happened on Dorothea Dix that I know of, and maybe it needs to. We need to get that committee to meet, Tanya, and I don't think anything has happened, has there?
No, nothing has happened.
All right. Well, Tanya, let's talk about setting up something for that committee so that we begin to get traction again on that and match the planning process, which is ongoing with the city. Kay Webb is blessed that she doesn't have to make a report today on accommodation.
Well, actually, I do.
Oh,
we have a number of people. That's okay. We have a number of people who have expressed interest in the commission's work, being on the commission, and since we don't have any vacancies at the present time, we're working on getting them to be civilian members of either research or community awareness committee. So we're working on that.
I think that's great. We need a taxi squad or whatever, so that we've got a ready pool of persons to put on here with the inevitable turnover that we will have. So so if we can get some of these people involved in committees and see that they actually will work, then that will be all to the good. Other business. Tanya, what is this about a treasurer's report?
Oh, that would be Katie.
Yes. Hey there. Just a note, since we've transferred over and I've now taken up the position as treasurer, I've been working with our previous treasurer, John Henshaw, who was kind enough to file our Form 990 this past year, which we need to maintain our nonprofit status. So I'll continue working with him and getting everything transferred over. No major news there, but that is the report.
Thank you. And keep alive a nonprofit vehicle that would be useful, or might be useful if we needed that vehicle to use in a preservation effort. So there's no separate money at the moment, as I recall. But we have this vehicle. We might as well keep it alive in case we need to use it at some point. Anything from commissioners as a report from staff?
Nothing else.
Nothing else. Anything else for the good of the group or news of other organizations and the like? Anything you think you ought to share while we're all together here?
One quick thing, Nick, I'll go take pictures today of that pedestrian walkway, see what its status is. Remember over in Hayes Barton, it was, they had to rebuild it after they tore it out. I was by there the other day, and I just take some pictures, and also take some pictures of that house on Pollock, that the grand house is being renovated. Apparently they're not tearing it down and doing some of the other things to it that we covered about 6 months ago. I'll try to get those to Tanya to distribute to everybody, just so you see an update of some of the stuff we did in the past.
And Tanya, if you keep on your list, we need to address the Rothstein house, which is over in that Hayes Barton area too, and not drop the ball on that.
Okay.
All right. Anything else, folks? All right. Well, it's good seeing all the faces, Tanya. I wouldn't mind seeing your face someday. But we'll get you a camera sooner or later, I hope. Take care, everybody. A motion to adjourn has been made and passed. This meeting is over. Take care.